Welcome everyone. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. Feel free to connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. Please use hashtag #LearningTuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we will be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, feel free to connect with us. Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. The webinar will begin in just a second, and it will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this webinar. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. And be sure to select panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. And we will also dedicate the last 20 to 30 minutes to respond to the questions you post during the discussion. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed on Friday to everyone who registered. And we will be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during Q&A, and we highly encourage you to respond. This just helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Lastly, before we start, I would just like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Today is Learning Loss Recovery webinar series, the federal role in advancing digital equity for early learning. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Next Tuesday, as you'll notice, there is no GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar, and we encourage all of you to go out and vote if you have not done so already. On Tuesday, November 10th, Crucible of Practice, a peer-to-peer learning and sharing series for GLR to date of the GLR campaign in Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte reads. And at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, the future of early math, what the science and practice tells us. Lastly, on November 17th, we have a Funder to Funder conversation at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time with the Clinton Family Foundation and Too Small to Fail. And at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we have Parent Coaching, a key ingredient to parent success. We will be sure to add links in the chat box for more information and registration for these upcoming learning opportunities. And joining you now is Jenny Atkinson.
Thanks, Sierra. I'd like to welcome all of you to our first Crucible of Practice Salon. We've created this webinar series to provide a deep dive exploration of how community coalitions are approaching and moving the work to improve the early school success prospects of children from economically challenged families, neighborhoods, and communities. Our goal is to illuminate the factors and dynamics that combine to propel progress. In each Crucible of Practice Salon, we will hear from a community lead and other members of that coalition and community who will speak directly to how they're doing this work and how stakeholders are partnering together to create momentum and synergy. On this slide, you can see that the range and breadth of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. We know that there's so much that we can learn from each other, and we saw that with the recent What's Working Community Challenge, where 112 communities posted 326 stories on Clip that lifted up what they were doing while also addressing what they saw working and under what conditions. Too many W's. As we continue to collect and share these stories through additional What's Working rounds, and let me do just a quick promo here. It's not too late to post a story for What's Working round 2. We've seen a lot of stories about the innovative ways communities have pivoted to address the COVID-19 pandemic, and that which is the theme of this round. But we know there are more strategies out there and stories to be told by communities. We'd love you to share what you're doing on Clip as we continue to learn from each other. And I'll post my email and my colleague Bob email's address in the chat so you can reach out to us if you have any questions about the What's Working rounds. Commercial over. So again, as we continue to collect and share these stories through additional What's Working rounds, we see these Crucible of Practice salons as an opportunity to dig even further into the work that communities are doing and to make more visible not just the what, but also the how, with the goal of learning even more about what it takes to be successful, as well as how to replicate models that are working and reach for sustainable scale. After hearing from a community, we'll have plenty of time for further questions and conversation. We want these Crucible of Practice salons to invigorate communities by opening up space where we can all learn from and with each other as you are all doing the work in real time. I'm so excited to hear more through these Crucible of Practice salons from communities who are doing cutting edge work that's making a difference. And I'm thrilled that during our first Crucible of Practice salon today, we will hear from representatives of Read by Fourth in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Our conversation today will be a focus on the power of collective impact, the Read by Fourth story, again in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And on the next slide, you'll see our presenters, who include Jenny Bigoni, the Executive Director of Read by Fourth, Wanda Mayal, a Program Director with Global Citizen, and Simone Partridge, the Communication Director with Read by Fourth. So now I'd like to introduce our moderator and presenter, Jenny Bigoni. Jenny is the Executive Director of Read by Fourth, a citywide effort of 50 organizations, public and private, large and small, and convened and managed by the Free Library of Philadelphia. Read by Fourth aims to increase in a big way the number of students in Philadelphia entering fourth grade at the reading level. Previously, Jenny was the Executive Director at Spark, a national nonprofit that provides life-changing apprenticeships to youth from disadvantaged communities as a means to reduce the dropout crisis. And she also served as the Vice President of the Philadelphia Youth Network, where she facilitated development and implementation of a multifaceted work plan that has resulted in a 12% gain in the graduation rates. And it's not in her bio, but she's someone who is always willing to share what they're doing with everybody in the network, and we really appreciate her wisdom and her generosity in that way. So welcome, Jenny.
Thank you very much, Jenny. It's the Jenny Show. I appreciate it. I am happy to be here, and I really appreciated one of the things you said in your intro, and that we're really here to learn with others. Our willingness and our enthusiasm to tell our story is in hopes of starting a conversation through which we can learn from you, because I know that you are all doing very similar things in slightly different ways, and there's always something to be learned from each other that we can steal and take back. And so that's one of the reasons I'm here today. So with that, I'm going to ask you to bear with me for a few minutes, even though I know we're all doing similar work. I'm going to give the quick kind of elevator speech of what is Read by Fourth, because I think it may be interesting to see how we describe ourselves and see whether it resonates with you and in your community. So the tagline that we've been landing on and using most recently is that Read by Fourth is here to protect every child's right to read. We are really, really motivated by a sense of social, educational, and racial justice, and how early literacy plays into the equity conversation right now. And so this really is our driving message. If you would continue on to the other slides, Sierra. Why are we doing this work? You all know this, it's preaching to the choir, but we know that this third grade reading benchmark really is one of the early indicators of whether children are headed to a lifetime of success or not. Keep going, please. We also really know, however, that it's not just about the children, it's really about how our communities can thrive, and that this is an important benchmark for all of us in the city if we want a Philadelphia that can really be a world-class city. However, in Philadelphia, right now, only about 1 in 3 of our children is meeting the benchmark that we've set. And again, motivated by that sense of social justice, we look at this picture and we see 3 thriving, joyful young children. Who would want to be the one to choose which one of these gets to meet that benchmark while the other 2 are left behind? None of us want to make that choice. We're not willing to, which is why we are really working hard to protect all of these girls' right to read. To do that, Philadelphians came together back in 2015 to launch Read by Fourth. Right now, if you go to the next slide, we describe ourselves as a movement. You'll also see we're not that humble. We've described ourselves as the nation's boldest citywide call to action. I'm sure many of you out there are doing equally bold things, but this plays well locally when we describe ourselves this way. So thank you for allowing us that grace to be so bold. But we do believe we're one of the largest cities that really is working border to border across the whole city in all neighborhoods for all Philadelphians. And Jenny said that we are a coalition of about 50 partners, and I'm sorry I didn't catch this in my bio, Jenny, that's old news. We are really a coalition of more than 150 partner organizations. We have more than 400 individual reading captains. We have countless families that have joined our movement through our social media and our trainings. And we have other community activists who have gotten involved by hosting book nooks or putting up signage. So it really is becoming a community movement. What binds us together, despite being such a diverse coalition of different types of organizations and entities, is this idea that came from one of our partners that likely the most underutilized resource in our communities is a family's love for their children. And if we can tap into that innate love and innate desire for your children to succeed, that is a resource we can turn into success. So we are all bound together by that core belief. Over the past 5 or 6 years, there's a number of things that we've gotten done, and I just want to review some of the accomplishments by sector. In our schools, and we do a lot of work with our schools directly, our schools have been focused on really reshaping how reading is taught, rethinking the classroom, rethinking what books are in classrooms, what instructional tools are there, but most importantly, really thinking about how teachers teach reading and aligning that instruction to the science of reading, which involves a massive citywide coaching mechanism for teachers that have literacy coaches in each building to help them really shift their practices. Keep going, please. We're also looking at the practice around, no, you can go back one, the practice around attendance and making sure that attendance is being done with a trauma-informed lens and a voice of really support. So we really are breaking down attendance goals by the month, really talking about how much we miss children when they're not in school, and really trying to remove the punitive stick version of truancy to a more supportive version of attendance. We're also looking at all the different places and spaces that children spend time, and we're working with those places to infuse literacy activities into what are otherwise excellent moments. So we're making guides like the one you see in the bottom right, which is our Reading Champs guide, which has a number of really easy games that people can do anywhere with little extra resources or no extra tools. So we're really trying to transform everyday moments for children into brain building moments. We've launched 3 different versions of ways that individuals can volunteer to support children reading outside of school. Some of these are now virtual, where they're reading aloud with children over the internet. And some, as you can see, were in person. Hopefully we'll go back to being in person, but they're all kind of encouraging the love of reading. We're also transforming neighborhoods. One of our biggest initiatives happened a few years ago with Wanda's organization, Global Citizen. We worked on Martin Luther King Day of Service to build book nooks that we installed throughout the city. And on that one day, we installed 150 different book nooks in kind of non-traditional spaces like laundromats and small family restaurants and health clinics. That started really a movement around book nooks and book installations. We now have nearly 1,000 installations of books throughout the city of Philadelphia. We're also looking at other ways to really activate these non-traditional spaces to build little brains. So we have signage in grocery stores, we have signage in laundromats, we've put books in the barbershops, as you can see there. So that's who we are. And in a moment, I'm gonna stop and ask you if you have any questions about kind of what we are. You could post those in the Q&A or the chat, and Jenny will forward them to me. And as you're doing that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're going to cover in the rest of today's presentation. There's really 3 messages we have for you today. The one Jenny alluded to in her intro as well. We all know what it takes to raise a reader. We're all bound as part of the national effort around grade level reading on the same kind of approach to thinking about a child from birth to age 8. What we want to talk about today is how we put that into practice and what it takes in terms of our structure to make that real. We want to look and share with you a little bit about our communications and the voice we use in our communications and how important we found it is to speak as a peer with our communities and not to our communities. And lastly, we want to share with you how we are being driven to create space for our communities to actually be the change agents around this issue. Jenny, are there any questions that I should answer before we move on?
Yes, we have one question from Marie O'Brien. She says, I love the different programs in transformation in communities to add book nooks and installations. How do you handle branding for all of the programs? Does everyone promote that they are part of Read by Fourth?
Yes. So we are really clear that Read by Fourth is not an organization. Read by Fourth is the movement that we are all a part of. So the Read by Fourth brand is something any organization can use. And we encourage partners to say, proud partner of Read by Fourth, or as part of Read by Fourth, or in support of Read by Fourth, but to have their own branding on it as well.
Great. Any other questions? No more questions coming in yet.
All right, well, we can keep going. Feel free to post them as we go. So as I was saying a minute ago, as we joined the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, as Read by Fourth was being birthed in Philadelphia, we adopted the same kind of approach to this work that I believe all of you are following, which is this idea that we know what it takes to raise a reader. We know we've got to build those brains in the first 3 years of life. We know we need to get children ready for school. We know we need to make sure they're attending school and participating regularly. We know we need to look at the quality of reading instruction. And we know we need to look at the out of school time and summertime to make sure we're reducing any learning loss and reinforcing what's happening in school. And I don't know how I left it off this list here because it's key to our work here in Philadelphia, but we also know the importance of families and how we have to leverage families to ensure all those things happen. And we approach this work with all of this in mind, and we set up our dashboard to measure these kinds of outcomes for the child. And we set about to have working groups around these types of activities. And we were doing that for a number of years and accomplished all the things that I just glossed over with you very quickly. And yet 5 years in, what we found is that really didn't tell our whole story. It told the story from the child's perspective. It told you what was happening for that child. It told you whether we had impacted that child or not. But it didn't talk about whether we had transformed our community. It didn't talk about whether we had created a culture of early literacy. It didn't talk to whether parents were more bought in or not than they had been in the past. And it really didn't speak at all to how we wanted to go about building brains or how we were going to ensure school readiness. We developed all that how as we went, as you all have too. But what we have learned is that our theory of change and what we told to funders and what we told to our partners was still really based on the child's experience and therefore didn't allow for a rich enough story. Can you go on to the next slide, please? So as a result, we spent a lot of time talking to ourselves and reflecting and trying to actually document the how of what we do at Read by Fourth. And the result is this slide here, which is our theory of change. And it incorporates all of that life trajectory of the young child that we just talked about. But this theory of change really talks to what we need to be doing as a movement if we want those things to be true, if we want those brains to develop, if we want kids to show up to school ready to learn, if we want them in school every day on time. So if you could imagine with me in the center of this circle here, you see a graphic with an adult and a child sitting on their lap reading a book. That's our ultimate goal. That's protecting that child's right to read. That's that child ending up on grade level by the time they enter 4th grade. What we know is for that to become true, there's 3 conditions that we need to see in Philadelphia. We need to see families who understand their power to help children with reading. We need to see communities and neighborhoods that are literacy rich. And we need to see systems that are fairly resourced and equitably designed. Those are those 3 Venn diagram circles in which that graphic is sitting. For those conditions to come to be, we have 3 major strategies. We need to be focused on asset-based family engagement. We need to be focused on community-led neighborhood mobilization. And we need to be focused on equitable policy change. And those things, of course, impact each other and are kind of a constant cycle of work. And for those things to be possible, there's the work of convening our partners. And that takes building partnerships. It takes identifying the right organizations and individuals to be part of this movement, bringing them into working groups, helping build partnerships and alignment amongst them, creating all of our collective work. Then there's the work of capacity building across our local ecosystem. I actually prefer the term field building for this work, but I find when I use field building, people don't always know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to tell you what I'm talking about. But we're talking about how strong is the ecosystem that supports early literacy in Philadelphia. How many people are working on this? Are they working on it in an aligned way? Do we have shared measurements? Is it well funded? Do we have the right policies and practices in place? So all of that field building and capacity building work is part of what we do. We also spend a lot of time storytelling and communicating, especially now in the time of COVID, when so much work is virtual. A lot of our work is on social media and through our website and through virtual trainings and through webinars, but it needs to have a shared brand. We need to have shared messages. We need to all be telling the same story and telling it together. We also need to be doing a lot of data and research work. We need to understand what the national research says. We need to understand our local data. We need to make sure our partners understand local data in the same way, that we're sharing data with each other, that we're tracking our work, and that we're using that to inform any evolution of our strategies as situations change and as the data changes. This is what we really feel, looking back over the last 5 years, has been our theory of change and is our theory of change going forward, which will allow us now to tell a much different story. It will allow us to track data around the strength of our partnership, around what's happening with families, around the change of a culture of literacy in Philadelphia, around the transformation of communities, and around systemic change in our public systems. All of that work, of course, is built on a set of core values. Because what we find when I share that theory of change is people quickly say, what about equity and what about accountability? And those things are absolutely part of our work. We think of those more as our core values than the theory of change and the guiding fabric that binds our collective together. So we really believe in collaboration. We believe in equity. We believe in continuous learning. We have to have a sense of urgency and accountability, and we have to continually have an evolution to our work. So if that's what we believe in terms of our beliefs and what we know has to be true in how we do our work, what does that mean about how we're structured? So for Read by Fourth to get all this work done, we have now, I want to say it's about 10 different standing meetings of some sort that meet with some level of regularity. We have a parent council that gathers to both inform our work and give us family perspectives, kind of a sounding board for our work. We have a funders roundtable. These are the funders that fund the backbone and organizing structure of Read by Fourth. We bring them together on a relatively regular basis to keep them updated and hearing the same story, hearing what's happening across the network so they can inform their own funding strategies, but also so they can inform the campaign itself. We have 3 steering committees. These are aligned to those 3 conditions. So we have a steering committee on the systems work. We have a steering committee on family engagement. We have a steering committee on the community mobilization. And then we have a group of working groups that are really more tactical in nature, that are focused on specific pieces of the work. So there's a working group that's just looking at the teacher preparation and support side of the work and the teacher pipeline, and how do we get teachers prepared to teach reading aligned to the science of reading and into the classrooms. We have another one that's on volunteer engagement. Many of our partners are recruiting volunteers to support this work. How do we make sure that those recruitment efforts aren't competing with one another, but are instead really encouraging Philadelphians to join the Read by Fourth movement as a volunteer and then find the right place for them? Which of these volunteer opportunities is the right one? How do we look at attendance? How do we look at building home libraries? How do we look at expanding the amount of reading support that happens outside of school? And how is it aligned to what's happening in school? How are we looking at data? What data does everyone have? How does this data speak to each other? What data can be shared in new ways? All of these are working groups. And the beauty of our working groups is that, to some extent they're ad hoc. They will last for more than a year, many of them, 2 or 3 years. But as new opportunities arise, we can add a working group, we can sunset a working group. And then we have partner network meetings, because with all of these groups and all of these partners, we need some way of keeping people aligned with each other across all of these working groups. So on a rough 3 times a year, we bring together the entire network to hear what the various working groups are doing, to understand the work in the other steering committees, and make sure that things are not just working in silos. And then occasionally we have special events. We just had one a week ago. We had called our Reading Promise Festivals, and Simone will tell you more about those. If you could keep going. So those steering committees are really all focused on a type of systemic change. And I wanted to speak for a moment about what the work of those steering committees really looks like. So let's look at the Leadership Council one. This is the one focused on the systems themselves. So in this committee, we are focused on the types of things you see in the bullets on the right. Now, this list is not meant to be the definitive list of all of the work of this group. It actually would probably be 2 or 3 pages long, and it doesn't really fit on one slide, but it gives you a flavor of the issues that this group is looking at. And you can imagine the types of partners that would be invited to be part of this table. You need representatives from each of these major systems, and you see K-12, ECE, out of school time, health. All of these systems are at the table, and they're looking at how can we make sure the policies and practices and protocols and the budgeting strategies of these systems are aligned and set up to make these things come to pass. In the Family Engagement Steering Committee, we're looking more at how do we create home literacy habits inside families' homes that we know will result in children reading better. So we have our 5, what we call reading promises. Simone's going to talk to you about our reading promises a little bit later as well. But in this committee, partners are coming together to think about how can we translate this knowledge we have about these 5 promises and really disseminate them to families throughout Philadelphia in a way that engages families in that conversation and has families being the one that are driving for this type of change. And in the community mobilization one, we're looking at issues around transforming place. How can we make every corner of our city set up to support brain development, set up to support literacy, set up to support families, set up to reinforce what's happening in our systems? So the partners that are coming to this steering committee are partners like the Mural Arts Initiative, which paints murals all throughout the city, or Laundromat Association that could think about how we could better use the laundromat spaces. So those types of partners are active in this steering committee. So when you look at those bullets that are on those slides I just showed, the next question is, well, yeah, but what is the work that they really do at a steering committee level? Because many of the decisions that you're talking about are not decisions that we as Read by Fourth partners can make. They're really decisions that one partner at the table needs to go back into their organization and affect that change. So what is it that as a table, as a committee, why do we exist? And these bullets are really trying to answer that question for you. We really think about our shared work as that of understanding the local data, making sure we have a shared understanding of it, making sure we understand what possible solutions are out there, coming to some consensus about what solutions we'd like to see in our community, understanding what are the obstacles to getting those solutions into place, both as a community and individually for some partners, and then figuring out what we can do to build public and political will for those changes to happen and how we can help remove barriers for our partners to make the kind of change we'd like to see them make. And then when partners make those changes, how do we celebrate them? Or how do we give them the political cover in that moment to make the kind of change that we want to make? If you go to the next slide, we ran across recently this framework that that the Center for Evaluation and Innovation put out, which really talks to what I just went through. And if you think about who's at your table being the audience, and you can see that at any given decision point, there is a decision maker. And if you were to go up to the top of that box in the upper right, you see that a decision maker can take some actions that result in changes to policy, protocol, and practices. And it's all the other 8 boxes is the work that people around the table can do. My cat is trying desperately to get on my laptop right now and join our webinar. So the work of the table is doing those blue and white bullets I have on the left in order to create the conditions in which a decision maker can be in that upper right-hand box and make the decision we want them to make. And that's really what we see the work of Read by Fourth being a lot of the time. If you go back one slide, actually, I'm going to pause there and I'm going to ask you in the chat, if you would for a moment, because it'd be interesting for us at Read by Fourth, if you would note where you see yourselves doing similar work, which of these kind of bullets resonate with what you're spending a lot of time on, and anything that you feel really resonated around how we documented our theory of change to incorporate the how. I'd be really curious whether those hows resonate with your work as well and what stands out as similar to what you're doing. And then I'd also pause for any questions. Jenny, are you going to feed me questions?
I can, yeah. But I'm just giving people a second to think about your thought-provoking request for the chat. And we have one person who has replied to parent engagement. So we can continue to call those out as people say things in the chat. Beth Duda says, I love the way you've laid out all aspects of your work. While people are commenting, we have a couple questions. So from another Jenny, we have the question, you mentioned a dashboard. What kind of data platform do you use for tracking progress and keeping all partner data aligned?
I wish I had an excellent answer for that. Right now, we're using a lot of different versions of things, honestly, and we're trying to figure out the best. We are updating our dashboard to incorporate everything I talked about in that theory of change. And most of that data is being kept on an Excel spreadsheet, essentially, and in Google Sheets. And we're looking to see if there's a better solution.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. Ashley Brandt asks questions about the data piece. Are you asking partners to collect specific data so that metrics are aligned between organizations and community-wide?
Yes, we are. We have a partner quarterly survey that goes out that collects data across partner organizations. It's quite challenging because given the diversity of our partner network, no matter how we structure the survey, about 3/4 of it doesn't relate to any given partner we send it out to. So it's quite hard on our partners to kind of get through, but they've stuck with us and I appreciate that. But we collect all sorts of information, like a lot of it is output information, how many books were given away, how many parents are you reaching with what type of training, how many volunteers have you recruited. But in terms of outcome data, we're starting to have conversations at the data working group for things like what can all of the out of school time partners be collecting that would allow us to look at maybe changes in background knowledge so that we could talk citywide and aggregate data. So we see that kind of conversation being the type of conversation that happens at our data working group and then comes back to other steering committees to integrate. So we don't have all of that in place, but it's what we are working and striving toward as partners.
Thanks. Leslie Watt asks, when did you break into 3 steering committees, or did you initially structure your approach this way?
So that's actually just recent, really beginning this fall. We had a leadership council that we did not call a steering committee that was focused on the systems work. And then we had working groups focused on a lot of tactical work. And what we realized is that we really did believe in these other conditions, and they needed the same level of leadership discussion that we weren't really getting by just focusing on the tactical implementation of strategies. And so we started these steering committees about 3 months ago. And so they're just in the midst of finalizing their work plans. And then we bring together the facilitators of each of these steering committees on a quarterly basis so that they can keep their work aligned.
Great, thanks. We have a few more questions. Angela Zanelli asked, can you speak to what your parent council looks like and how it functions, and even how you recruit the parents?
So we recruit the parents through our partners. We have flyers and language and social media posts that they can put up and encourage parents to join. The parent council has shifted a little bit in the time of COVID, but it really was a time for parents to come together, and it starts with support and listening to parents and what's happening in their lives and why they came, what they're interested in, what their concerns are, and really building a sense of community among those parents. And then once that sense of community is there, we can bring questions to them. We can say, here's something we want to move forward. We're thinking about doing this activity. Does this seem like it would be useful? How would you structure it? What would you need? And it really does function as a sounding board. And we listen to their conversations and get ideas. They generate ideas for us as well of things they'd like us to take back to steering committees, et cetera. We also now have a structure in place where representatives of the parent council sit on the steering committees so that there's parent voice in all of those places and on some of the working groups as well. And Wanda will talk a little bit more about our reading captains, many of whom are also parents, and how we strive to get some of that parent voice through the Reading Captain Network as well.
Great, thanks. Are we going to take 2 more questions and then we'll go on? There'll be more time for questions at the end. Do you provide backbone support to organizations for data collection?
We do not, no.
Okay. And Monroe Richardson asks, how much time and energy have you had to spend on getting your 100+ partners on the same page? How do you allocate your time to continuous engagement and check in to keep this alignment? Do you ever sleep? No.
Well, we always joke if we're doing our jobs well, we've run over our data minutes on any of our cell phone plans, but of course now we all have unlimited data, so that doesn't quite work as well as an analogy, but it is a lot of conversations. We do have to keep kind of, just like someone who does development would keep a tickler list of who they need to be in contact with and how often. We need to run through our partners and make sure they've had touch points and that we've said hello and that they're coming to meetings. And if we stop seeing them in meetings, we need to reach out and say, what's not working about this for you anymore? Are you the right person in your organization? Is your organization now focused on something else? It's okay if partners move on, but we need to kind of know what's happening. So yeah, Monroe, it's a lot of, well, it used to be a lot of lunches and drinks, and now it's just a lot of Zoom calls and emails and texting. But it's relationship building, and it's constant, and it takes staff time. But we also are very clear that we are not running programs, right? As a backbone organization, our partners do the programming. And so our role as staff is that kind of communication and relationship building.
Great, thank you, Jenny. And thanks for all the great questions. Keep them coming and we'll come back to them later in our presentation.
We can move on to Simone now, and I'm going to introduce Simone, who's going to tell you a little bit about our communications and storytelling. So Simone Partridge is a communications strategist with a love of behavioral science, cities, and photography. And those 3 things actually are key to her success in this role. but mostly she's a storyteller looking to use creativity to make positive change. Simone joined us recently as our Director of Communications. However, she's known Read by Fourth and been a partner of ours nearly since from the beginning. She's focused on telling neighborhood stories through sharing family literacy lessons and highlighting the great work of our 150 partner organizations. Before working directly with us, she worked at Ogilvy, helping FEMA grow a culture of flood readiness across the Mid-Atlantic. And before that, she worked at a firm called Mighty Engine, which is our communication strategy vendor that we use, where she made sure great nonprofits had communications that match. Simone, take it away.
Hi everyone, I'm so glad to be here. And Jenny, I was glad to see your cat was trying to climb onto your computer because we're all working from home and I have a dog who's been barking and I'm just persuading him with treats under the table. So sorry if you get a bark or two throughout this presentation. But I just love to start with really saying that, and sorry, you could go to the next slide, that a huge part of our work is really about speaking to the community as the community. And I'm a Philly girl through and through. I'm from Philly. My parents are from Philly. I went to college right outside. I always say my life's radius is about this big. But as much as Philadelphia is a city that's about, is about the city of brotherly love and we're about cheesesteaks, we're also about family. We're also about family. And that it's so much of our work is about, I'm going to move. So much of our work is, and so much really the
Simone, you went unstable with your Wi-Fi.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Simone. Don't worry about
I'm moving from a barking dog to a less internet stable. But essentially what I was saying is that there's so much in understanding great communications is understanding who you're talking to and how to listen well. And so much, a lot of times as communications experts, whether you're in nonprofits or in business, you are wearing your expert hat. And sometimes when we do that, we forget who we're talking to and even who we are. And why I raise this is because with Read by Fourth, we're a coalition of partners. And yes, we're educators. Yes, we're educators. Yes, we're educators. Yes, we're teachers, but we're also parents and families, just like those that we're trying to serve. So a huge part of our communications work is really understanding that when we communicate, that it's, yes, we have those expert hats and we have those roles, but so much of the time, the best communications and the best advice that we get is actually from our peers. And so a huge part in our messaging strategy is really shifting the language of how we speak and communicate, not just through words, but through actions towards having an understanding that we're communicating with people who are just like us. And so if you go to the next slide. And so Reading Promise is a campaign that we started that's really focused on communicating to parents and caring family members about the key critical points that help boost young readers. So it's not so much, as you all know as practitioners in this space, that so much about learning to read happens in school, but just as much happens at home. And so with the Reading Promise campaign, our goal was really to showcase what are the top things that are both expertly proven, but also common sense family things that we all know at the end of the day help children learn to read. And so the Reading Promise framework is to create a set of points that are jargon-free, that are clear and easy to communicate, to really help showcase these things. So in our communications, it's all framed in terms of the first person. So instead of telling families you need to read more at home, we shifted to, I promise to, as a caring family member, and caring community member, that I promise to make reading together our special time, and reading our special thing. And in that part of the framework, we're really pushing reading, but also the ABCs of reading and active reading. We ask families to talk it up and not just have one directional conversations, but have the type of conversations where you're really listening to your child and making sure you show them that you really hear the power of their voice and everything that they have to say. We want, as family members, we want to make sure that we're championing our children's school success, celebrating attendance, celebrating those little tiny moments. We want to make sure that we create time to create with each other, whether it's writing, drawing, illustrating, all of the creative endeavors that allow children to develop their own voice and not only be able to read, but to write the stories that they want to interact with. And then finally, the last piece is really about protecting your child's right to read and making sure that parents and families know that these are systemic issues and that we are, as a movement, not only have their back, but there's opportunities for all of us to work together to move this forward. And sorry, so next slide. And so what does this actually look like in practice? When we were saying that we're really shifting our voice to something to really showcase that we are not only speaking to parents, but we're speaking as parents. Practically, it looks something like this. So this would be an ad. Like I said, it's really about using the first person in our voice. It's about showcasing photos of real Philly families in settings that people recognize, so they see themselves as readers and really celebrating actual families. So this is an ad, and it just says, I dream beyond black and white, I read in color. Time and time again, we families and just the industry knows there's a lack of book diversity. And so we're kind of shining a light on that, but making sure that there's avenues for change and to really celebrate that. And so, sorry, next slide. And so this is another instance where these are actually real Philly families that we've connected with through partners, through going out through on the streets and talking with families about early literacy. And really, this is one about, I promise to talk it up, take turns. So it's a stretch every chance to talk more, talk with you and not at you, hear the power of your voice. So again, it's really using beautiful imagery and shifting our language to make sure that even though we're not throwing off our expert hats, but we're just making sure that families understand that we're families just like them. These aren't people that we just need to help and serve, but they're our peers, they're our neighbors, they're people that we know. And so, sorry, next slide. And I believe that this is going to showcase a video. So a lot of the work that we do, I think that video ends up being a great tool, not only to bring all of these things to life, but also sometimes our families have literacy issues of their own. So anytime that we can not only have written word, but having oral, like having audio pieces, we love to incorporate that into our work. So here is a short video.
This is more than a story. It's a promise to ask more questions, share more laughs, and make the most of our time together. This is a promise to help you see the world and yourself on every page, to create memories as we create art, and pass down traditions while raising our voices. This is more than a story. It's your story. And I promise to help you find the words to write your next chapter. Reading is the key to the life our children deserve.
So this is an example of some of the types of things of how we're bringing this reading promise to life. And it's so much more than a set of messages, but can be transformed into video. It can be transformed into talking points. That was an example. In that video, we ended up using social media and running it as kind of a social media ad to drive awareness to our new site. And additionally, just as much as communications about understanding who you're talking to, it's about responding to the context in which that we're all living. So this was actually, we wrote this about a few years ago, but it still rings resonant today. And this was written as a video script that's yet to be produced. So you guys are getting a sneak peek. But the whole idea is that when we talk about reading and introducing this idea of protecting every child's right to read, it really underscores that this is a social justice issue and emphasizes that there's a problem and there's an issue that we need to fix. So this is a video script. I'll read part of it. That is voiced in the voice of a child. So it's, I have the right to read, to dream beyond just black and white, to see myself within the pages and find a book that is just right. With each chapter, I see what's possible, read through and between each line. I hold the power of each word and share ideas that are just mine. So this is all a positioning reading and early literacy when we talk about these things as not just things that families can do, but emphasizes why this is so important, that to emphasize why this is so important, and that it's really about the kids and the kids' voices and making sure all of that is heard. And sorry, next slide. And so I don't know if any of you guys are as bold or are a little as wild in taking ideas and try to run with them as we were, but over October, we decided that we were going to try to actually pull together a citywide early literacy event. I don't know if you drop in the comments below if anyone is thinking of doing events, because I'd love to reach out and talk with you about what we've learned. Honestly, it was really a feat. So previously we had the idea at the top of spring to do an event, but this was at the beginning of the pandemic. So obviously we had to shift course, but towards October, the numbers had shifted. And once we approached fall, we were like, you know, I think that we can put the proper safety precautions in place to make sure that we can bring this to life across Philly. So what was so amazing about the Reading Promise Week and these festivals were that they were actually community driven. It wasn't Read by Force saying, this is what your event needs to look like. We invited 13 organizational community partners to define and find events. So if you go to the next slide, we actually had 30 events during this week, both virtual and in person, which was absolutely amazing to see all the great hard work that these community leads put in to bringing these together. What we brought to the table, is you can go to the next slide. What Read by Force was really offering, we created a variety of materials, whether it was like messaging about reading promise and bringing that to life. So people had seen the video, they went to the website, and then they were able to get shirts and bags and tote bags that were all about framed in this messaging where it's like, my kid loves to read. That was really celebratory. But additionally, there were, we helped secure books. We helped create other materials, whether it was a small notebook where kids could write and create with you. We had crayons, all of these different literacy promoting materials that took a variety of different forms. And so additionally, we had we were able to host a panel as part of our offering during Reading Promise Week. We had a virtual panel, and I'll drop the link to it in the comments below, but it was an amazing opportunity. We were able to get Emily Hanford, and if you haven't read her piece, her most recent piece, What the Words Say, definitely read it. But we were able to bring her in and have a great conversation about what early literacy and equity looks like in Philadelphia. So just a plug, I'll drop that link in the comments when I'm done speaking. And sorry, you can go to the next slide. So again, it was really about creating materials that, again, whether it was signage or bookmarks that really brought this idea of reading promise to life, where you're making early literacy fun and making it really conversation central. Sorry, next slide. So these are just a picture of the bags. And like, I'm always love to say, like, the bags went the quickest. People absolutely love these. They were stuffed full of books and activities. Like, it was really great to see. Next slide. You can go kind of quickly through these. This just shows you other materials that we created. And sorry, next slide. This is either a video or an image of some of the things, what this actually looked like. So I was able to go, I think I went to almost every single event except for one, and I was able to go afterwards. They were absolutely amazing. And so we had senators come out. This is Senator Art Haywood, who was in the Mount Airy section of Philadelphia. If there's any Philly people here who read to a class, and he was able to make a reading promise to the neighborhood and the kids that he was serving. There were, we had large book giveaways. You can also just go to the next slide, which is a static image, which is easier. We had book giveaways. We brought in local authors to bring and read their stories. And I love that image in the center where the girl, she's getting her book signed and she was so excited. Or the image on the left where the kid that shirt says, "I'm the author of my own story," which is part of the line of the right to read. But we had so many different ways that people could engage during this week. We had reading captains, which we'll be learning a little bit more about later, come up with their own activity booklets so families could go on a word scavenger hunt throughout this socially distanced event. It was really amazing, but what made it even better was that the fact it was partner and community driven, that yes, we created the framework for them, but everyone could buy into Reading Promise just as much as they come together and are a part of Read by Fourth. They were able to bring that language and use it in a way that was useful and meaningful to them. And next slide. And so part of our communications, as much, just like I said before, as much as it is about messaging and what you want to say out, it's about listening. So we've been going through a community listening process where we've been doing interviews. We've had phone lines where people could call in, all packaged as a communications campaign, but really as a way to hear and get feedback from the community. And sorry, you can go like probably 2 slides. And so what that looked like during the, one more back. What that looked like during the Reading Promise week was we had installations where families, we asked, what's your reading promise? And we really posed questions about how, what challenges there were in their community, but more importantly, how the community saw solutions and things that we could tap into and celebrate and add to. And it's just been really an amazing thing. There's been things that were expected. There were things that were surprising, but there's so many different ways through communications that you can engage your community. And that's honestly what it's all about. I don't think I have time for any questions because I'm going fast. And again, I apologize. They're tearing down a tree and it's sending my dog bananas. But please, I'll be around at the end to ask any questions. And then if you can go to the next slide. I'm a communications person and we're totally shameless. Sorry, next slide. So I know you guys are probably all on your cell phones or have them close by. Pull your cell phone out and follow us at Read by Fourth. We have fun, we share out fun messages and images that, yes, are fully focused, but honestly, I really think all families would enjoy and resonate with. So thank you, and I'm going to pass this baton off to Wanda, who's been doing absolutely amazing, kind of working alongside our reading captains who are such strong carriers of the Read by Fourth message and the Reading Promise message. Not only were they at the forefront of Reading Promise Week, they just show up every day, no matter what, to celebrate Read by Fourth. So I can't wait to hear more about what she has to share.
Thank you, Simone. I'm going to jump in. And you probably couldn't see it, but everybody was posting in the chat, please don't worry about your pup. So you were awesome. That was a stressful situation and you handled it with grace. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Wanda to you, and then we will break for questions about all of the things that Simone shared and what Wanda's going to share. So Wanda has been a leader in the nonprofit, governmental, and philanthropic sectors throughout her career. She brings to Global Citizen, her current employer, her extensive experience and expertise in designing and implementing social service programs, as well as managing organizational and systems change. Her former roles include Senior Program Associate for Child Welfare at the Annie E. Casey Foundation, Chief Executive Officer for Women Children Alliance, Chief Deputy Commissioner of Philadelphia's Department of Human Services, and Deputy Director of Congreso de Latinos Unidos. But more importantly, Wanda is just one of the most passionate Philadelphians I have ever met. She cares deeply about our communities and this work, and that's going to come through in the story she's going to tell you about Reading Captains. Wanda, please take it away.
Hi, and I hope you all agree with me that Simone was fabulous. And I'm hoping my Shih Tzu doesn't follow suit and have some challenges related to, not wanting me to talk. So I am a lifelong Philadelphian, and I think that while this collective impact work translates, I think, nationally and in your communities and in the work that you're all doing, I think that I hope you all bring in the work that you're doing an understanding and passion, and in some ways, an understanding and reality of the strengths and challenges, but beauty of the places that you work. I work with the Global Citizen, and there's the international one, and then there's the little one in Philadelphia. And Global Citizen was formed about 25 years ago as the first organization that really organized and implemented Martin Luther King Day of Service. And it's still the largest in the country in terms of mobilizing citizen action and service on MLK's birthday, or the observance of his birthday. And then it's grown, in addition to that, is to really be an organizer, facilitator of volunteers, and a facilitator of citizen action around social justice. And what drives us and what's rooted in that work is engaging citizens around racial and economic equality. And so when Jenny talked about sort of what drives the work and the choices that have been made, I think it's important for you to know that Read by Fourth and its partners, we don't choose between sort of framework and action and theory of change and values. Global Citizen wouldn't be at the table if Read by Fourth didn't value the import of social justice and racial and economic equality. I've had a unique family and work history. We did the little bio, and I'm not going to go into it for too long, but just to sort of set the tone, because I want you to understand that Reading Captains and the model are very much embedded into who and what Philadelphia is in terms of social change. My parents were older when they had me. My oldest brother was 25. I had nieces and nephews before I was born. They were older parents, and my father's midlife crisis was to become a minister. So I grew up in the second family as a part of a family committed to faith-based community activism in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. And then after college, went and worked at the grassroots level around women's health, community-based nonprofits, Department of Human Services and foster care, and then with the Annie A. Casey Foundation to build a national strategy for family and community partnerships with child welfare or with systems. And So this collective impact work, you know, even in the early days, I was shaped by it. And here's what I've learned along the way with partners like Read by Fourth, Annie Casey's work, others. Children belong in families. Parents and caregivers know what they need to ensure healthy outcomes for themselves and for their children. They just need access to resources to make that happen. Families need support from their neighborhoods and community to achieve success. And systems will not be successful in delivering for families, achieving the outcomes they want without authentic partnerships with community leaders and organizations. I believe that the work, this collective impact work that we've been doing, I'm sorry, move to the next, the next slide, has really fermented, cross-fertilized, and created some an opportunity for some of those learnings to be realized. The Read by Fourth campaign incorporates all of the children belong in families, parents need strong communities, systems need to partner with community. They incorporate all of those learnings and values into not just the theory of change, but an operational plan and an operational reality that enables community members to really lead and partner with delivering for kids and families. We're not just working to help make sure that kids read at grade level. That's the most important thing. That's a data thing that matters. And it's not happening at the level that we all want it. We're working to make sure that kids and their young children and their parents are not just getting books and access to resources, but that they are surrounded by family and community who usher them into lifelong love of reading. That's what the reading captains tell us, and that's what we want to be able to deliver. Reading captains are a product of a long history, a strong history of Philadelphia's neighborhoods, one of America's oldest cities. And this matters. The only reason I'm going through this is because knowing your community, knowing whatever your strategy will be, it's important to know and then tap into the strengths and understand the challenges of how you're organizing the work and bringing community and neighborhoods into the work. Philadelphia has neighborhoods that reflect the diversity, struggles, passion of a country that is rooted in citizen action. And based on kind of a block captain political model of neighborhood level leaders connecting families to resources and a political voice, reading captains are natural leaders who live and work in the communities they represent. Are we at slide 59? Yes. So I just want to make sure we're still moving. I'm rushing, so I apologize if I'm moving too quickly. Reading captains are at the table with us, building an agenda for early literacy and serving as a bridge between families of young children and system resources. They serve as the engine, and this is important because we talk about theory of change, and we're going to talk about that again. But I just want to be really clear. They're drivers of the work. They're an engine for Read by Fourth's community change effort. And so as a part of that theory of change, their parents, their teachers, social workers, aunties, children's book authors, we have them, city system and nonprofit staff, librarians, political activists, and neighbors. They are a part of that whole construct of our theory of change. And in the end, and so yeah, you've caught up, and then look at this wonderful slide. Reading captains are all of us. So how do we make the work happen? We have, so Global Citizen in partnership with Read by Fourth, but as the lead partner, we structured a framework and organizational process where we're the program management partner, but reading captains, we really help facilitate their leadership model. Once a reading captain is recruited, there's a formal training that is delivered by both reading captain trainers and staff. So there's like a collaborative process of the training. And there is a curriculum, and there's resources, and there's supports. There are 6 community regions for reading captains that have been determined. Each region has a reading captain facilitator that's selected by their regional reading captains to lead and facilitate the work of each region. The facilitators, that lead person, they're provided with a small quarterly stipend to support some of their expense and time, but it's not nearly reflective of, or doesn't nearly cover what they really do. They're natural leaders, they're doing the work anyway, but taking on that responsibility and helping us and committing to sort of attend meetings and turn in certain materials or reports or help us with a budget, they're able to get a stipend. There is both regional budgets that are smaller, but that enable reading captains to plan and deliver early literacy-based, whether it's events or other efforts, like the little libraries and some of the events that happen, but that are more directed to their neighborhoods. And then there's a budget that's more citywide that people submit requests for that enable us to do citywide efforts. And so what you see in this slide is this summer, reading captains, while being very clear about the challenges and of the pandemic, wanted to just reiterate the needs and expectations that they had for kids and families during the summer around physical books, physical reading activities, early literacy fun, and then resources for parents and information for parents. That might also include not just sort of how to help your child read or connect to learning activities, but also the census, registering to vote, other components of that. So we, this summer, in a pandemic appropriate way, meaning sort of making sure that we were able to adhere to social distancing and other public health measures, we're able to pull together books, partner with the library to get more books, and to also then have learning activities, the census information, and a variety of things, because they kept pushing and saying, we know that there are online opportunities and resources, but our kids and families need something physically in their hands. And we delivered more than 2,000 summer literacy kits to families. So the next slide is reading captains are leading the way. They drive the community level early literacy agenda by bringing the voices of kids and families to the table. They determine how resources should be allocated, and they inform systems and policymakers when families do not have what they need. And one key example is digital literacy. Moving to the next slide. Sometimes, despite best intentions, systems do not know the full needs of kids and families. Some of that relates to trust, and some of that actually relates to fear. What we learned through the summer as the pandemic was continuing, and it was likely that schools were going to continue or intensify their digital online learning, was that kids and families in Philadelphia weren't necessarily prepared, or some families, to really meet the needs, particularly of younger children, young, like from pre-K through the 2nd or 3rd grade, their needs around digital literacy. And so if we can go to slide 63, sometimes despite all of the good intentions, people don't have what they need, and they're not always going to tell you. They're not always going to tell the school that they're connected to that's reaching out to them. They're not always going to call the number on the sheet that they're given to say if you don't have to, you know, sort of internet or other things. And here's what's going on in Philadelphia, and this may be different in your communities. People owed money to the primary provider, and in our case, that's Comcast, Xfinity. And even though they were going to be doing this sort of specialized internet outreach and support to families, if they had a balance, they were still going to have to pay that, even if it was over time. Limited bandwidth. So yeah, you get this nice new connected, you know, sort of opportunity with the internet, but you might have to choose between your older children and your younger children because only so many devices can be sort of supported at one time. And then parent and caregiver digital challenges. I mean, I'm not putting that out as okay, that's our agenda. I'm putting it out as an example of, here's how folks become the bridge between kids, families, neighborhoods, and the systems and decision makers who help make things happen. We can go to 65. Just so you're seeing that sort of pieces of the intersection of the theory of change. Reading captains permeate all components of Read by Fourth theory of change. Reading captains are all of us. Then the last slide is, look at our wonderful reading captains and how wonderful they are. Think about how you define community. In our profession, it's often a geographic area with demographic and other data that helps us determine needs and strengths and how we appropriate resources. In political arenas, it's sometimes defined by alliances and voting records. And for some, it's a euphemism to define a set of people that are other than themselves. In Read by Fourth and their partnerships and as part of Global Citizen, I just want you to know that community is a set of compelling neighborhood regions that partner with us to protect the child's right to read. In our work, community defines itself. My final notes would be, as we're continuing to do this work, but also to support you as a partner and friends in this journey, bring your communities with you. And as you walk along the road to reform, glance around you, look ahead and look behind you. The community will be ahead of you, leading the way. Thanks.
Thank you, Wanda and Simone and Jenny. Wonderful presentation. And we do have some time here for some additional questions. And while you're posting a few in the chat, I did want to mention that Jenny did reply to a couple of questions that were in the Q&A box. So if you go to the answered section, you can see if it's a question you were also interested in hearing the answer to. She has answered a couple of questions there. So please feel free to add additional questions if you have any about any of our three presenters' comments. And I do have one that I wanted to ask. One person asked if you could talk a little bit more about ways that you incentivize partners and keep them at the table. Are there specific things you do there?
I will take that one. I don't think of it as incentivizing. I think about mutual benefit, right? So we have a shared vision for Philadelphia and the Philadelphia we all want. But for a partner to be active in one of our working groups or our steering committees, it has to make sense to them and to their work and what they're being paid to do on a daily basis. And if it's an individual who is coming out of their own just generosity of their time, we do sometimes give them an incentive or a stipend to participate as a professional at the table. So if they're having to kind of take vacation time or not do their hourly job because they want to be at our table, then we will provide some kind of gift card or something for them. But for those that are doing it kind of as their job, we look at what that meeting agenda is bringing to our partners. And I often talk about kind of 4 things that an agenda has to incorporate over time in order for that mutual beneficiality to be there for folks. This doesn't mean that every agenda that we shape has to include these things, but over a period of months, we need to touch on these things for all of our partners. We need to make sure that there is really an authentic way for that partner to give input in and help shape our shared vision and our shared strategies. If they're not a shared author of our work, it's probably not worth their time. We need to get them access to information that they wouldn't otherwise be able to access easily. So how are we sharing data from other partners with each other? How are we looking at research and digging into it almost like in a book club way so that we're all learning together? What's our shared learning agenda? This makes their work outside of our table better and easier, but it also just gives them a reason to come. Then there's the professional networking. You know, how are they building stronger partnerships amongst each other that will help them in other aspects of their work? And is it somehow positioning their organization or easing the work or advancing the rest of their organization's agenda as well? And how does it align with their agenda? So we think about those 4 things in ways to incent and keep partners at the table.
Great, thank you. You know, I think it's so easy for all of us to think about our agenda instead of a shared agenda, even when we're the backbone. And if that's not something that's just been embedded for a long time in your work, it's so important to keep asking yourself, are we doing enough to make sure this is a shared agenda? So that's great. That's great to hear. Thank you. We do have a quick question about the PowerPoint, and yes, we will follow up. Send a follow-up email to people with link to the PowerPoint and the recording. I have posted the link to the PowerPoint a couple of times in the chat. You need to be a member of CLIP to view it when you click on the link. So if you don't see it, you do need to join CLIP, which you can easily do there on the website. So another question from Monroe, do you ever have to push beyond current comfort level of your partners to do what you believe is important and timely? I'm thinking about the difference between a backbone and a field catalyst.
Of course, we need to. Whether we're always successful at doing that is another question altogether. And I think what we're often balancing is the desire to push with the need to keep partners at the table. So it often happens with our big systems partners the most. There may be something that we'd really like to see the school district do that is just not politically tenable for them to do right now. And if we get into too much of a pushing mode, we become outside advocates and not inside partners with them. And so there are times that we have to kind of swallow something that's not going to move right now in order to maintain our long-term partnership. And that's just a strategic decision about who we want to be as a movement and how we've built our tent. We could do this work as outside advocates. We could move into the advocacy space and do much more pushing. We would just structure ourselves differently in that case, but it would be another strategy for advancing the work. But given our theory of change and given how we're structured, we push as much as we can and then we let go and move on to something else.
Thank you. You know, I know you talked a little bit about how the committee, the steering committee, sorry, could help to provide cover for organizations that were ready but needed help making change that may not be something that was going to be easy for them to do. Do you have, like, have you seen any particular strategies, or do you have a specific example of a way that maybe that had worked with Read by Fourth?
Yeah, whenever these things come up, I wish I had my examples pre-written out, but so I'm going to somewhat make one up, piecing from some things, but maybe there's let's take leveling. So leveling is a practice that schools do in the fall when they look at who shows up in which classrooms, and then they shift teachers around based on attendance levels, and it can be very disruptive, and in a time of remote learning, even more disruptive. So there was a big push to try to get the school district to do less of the leveling this year. That is a decision that has all sorts of ramifications, budgetary and otherwise, and it's a hard decision to make, even if the school district themselves knows that that's what they want to do, right? So in that kind of instance, we might think about, well, which partners are positioned to write op-eds that kind of create more public understanding of the challenges faced by the district in making or not making these decisions. Mm-hmm. So how do you better educate the full public about the challenges that the district is facing? How do you start to create more outside pressure in a friendly way for the decision to come from the district, and for the district then to look like a hero by making a difficult decision? So it's really about laying the groundwork in the community for the partner to step out in faith that it's going to be okay, that they're going to make a hard decision, and then to be really quick right after them to congratulate that move. Like, that was really hard to do. That was a risk, and you did what was right for children, and really making sure that they have that cover.
Great, helpful example. Thank you. So I think we're going to, you should have seen a poll on your screen. So if you want to take a minute to answer the poll, go ahead and do that. I'm just checking to see if there's any other questions in the chat, which we don't have. I do see Monroe says the trick is to be a critical friend. So not seeing any more questions, I'm going to just go ahead and thank our amazing presenters from Read by Fourth, Jenny, Simone, and Wanda, for giving us such an inspirational presentation about the work that you're doing. It was so wonderful to hear and see a little bit of the work that's happening, and get a chance to learn a little bit more about how you actually are doing the work that we are able to see. So thank you so much for your presentation. I just wanted to remind people about upcoming GLR Tuesday webinars. Our next Crucible of Practice Salon is November 10th, where we'll be hearing from representatives at in Charlotte, Read Charlotte, the organization in Charlotte that's a part of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, will be presenting. Today, there's actually a webinar at 3 if you want to come back and join us again. And as Sierra said at the beginning, we won't have any webinars on November 3rd. We hope you're voting or helping other people vote. After the Crucible of Practice Salon on November 10th, we'll have a Science Matters webinar on the future of early math on November 10th as well. And then we have others coming up on the 17th. In particular, here we have the partner webinar on parent coaching. So lots of opportunities for you to stay connected and continue to learn. And we'll look forward to seeing you on another GLR Tuesday webinar very soon. Thanks everybody for joining us, and have a great afternoon.